You're listening to the Mile High Vineyard podcast. For more information about the Mile High Vineyard, go to milehighvineyard.org.
All right, good morning, church. How we doing today? You good? Hey, little secret. You guys, do you know that we have an 8:30 service? It's just worth thinking about. All right, just thought I'd throw that out there. We are so glad you're here today. Hey, if you're new, you have no idea what Grant was just talking about, little baby Jesus. We'll get to this white guy that's probably not Jesus in a moment. But before we get there, I want to pause. We're in the month of October, and 2 times a year specifically, in the month of May and the month of October, we give a special focus to kids and youth in the life of our church. If you're newer with us and haven't been around, over the last sort of year and a half, 2 years, we've really emphasized in the life of our church, we have 4 core leans, things that we're leaning into, trying to mark us as the people of God. And one of those is our investment in the next generation. That is our kids and our youth. And I find that there's lots of, misunderstandings or misconceptions about what it is to invest in our youth, because as we're doing church here together on Sundays, we also have that on the other side of the building. And so I invited a couple that just got into hanging out, leading our kids like in the last 3 months. And so I want to invite Kent and Karen to come up. And I just asked them to share a little bit of their experience over the last 3 months about what they are seeing as a way to encourage us and get us thinking about our kids. We want to celebrate what God is doing with our kids. And I also want to invite you to consider participating next year with them. So you guys take it away.
Good morning, everybody. My friends are all waving at me over there. That's cute. Oh, they're all over the place. Oh, precious. Thank you. We have been so blessed to get involved in the kids' ministry. Christy one day was telling me all about it, and she said, come check it out. Just come visit. So we did, and we were hooked. That was it. We've not missed since. However, it is flexible. If you guys get involved and you can't make it one week, we can find a sub for you. But this is my husband, Kent. He's got a couple of funny stories for you, so I'll let him talk.
Well, we usually come to the 8:30 service, and so while you're in here, we're back there with your kids. What a blessing they are. You're all doing a great job as parents. There's no doubt about it, and we get that benefit back there. But it's great to have an influence on your kids at an early age. And when they're back there, it's one of the greatest influences we can give them. And they touch our hearts. So you're blessing those kids. If you volunteer, you go back there and you spend time with those kids, you've got an opportunity to make a difference in their lives. But trust me, they're making a difference every time in your life. There isn't anything that I can say that adds more joy in our lives than, and we talk about it all week, after we spent time back there with those wonderful kids. It adds so much joy to our life, and we talk about it all week. So
we look forward to every week. We can't wait to come back to church.
Well, we've gotten to be where we want to take them all home with us. And I'll tell you, just don't know what's going to happen next. I mean, every time something special happens, the first week I was there, every kid there thought I was Santa Claus. Well, second week, we noticed that all the stories that were going on, whether it was Moses or Abraham or Noah, all the guys looked like me. They all had beards. And this one little boy, he just kept looking me up and down, and I could see the wheels were turning and everything. And he says, "Are you God?" So you just don't know what's going to happen next. I can tell you this, they add so much joy to our life, and they can add that same joy to yours. It's real. Just decide one day you're going to go back there and check it out, and I can guarantee you're all going to want to sign up to volunteer and be there on a regular basis. There isn't anything that I can think of that adds more joy lately in our lives than that. And how special your kids are, and what a great opportunity you have to make a difference in other kids' life. If each kid leaves with something each week, it's so special, and you don't know how far that's going to carry through their life even. And they can make a difference then in somebody else's life. It just multiplies. So the blessings that happen don't only happen to them, they happen to you. So give yourself a chance to spread your wings too. One thing for sure, when you look at us, you understand it doesn't take any qualifications. Everybody's qualified. You know, we're the best example. That's why they put us up here.
That's not true. That's not true.
Actually, I'd also like to tell you, it's not hard, really. The curriculum is completely provided. It's fun. There's fun songs, there's coloring, there's a little video. Everything's provided for you, so there's no real pressure on you. And you'll love it if you try it. Give it a chance.
Awesome. Can we give it up for these guys? I love hearing the new stories. And I mean, hearing those stories about the kids is so precious. That is what's happening. That's what we have a chance to impact the next generation. We have a new crew that's starting in January. You can serve once a month, twice a month, whatever age you want. Lindsay and her team are in the lobby. Would love for you to connect with them after the church. Over the next 3 weeks, we'll be talking about this, so be praying about it if you're not sure today. I don't know if you're aware, on any given Sunday, like this Sunday, there's between 120 and 160 kids and youth in this building on Sunday. So it's like its own church is occurring outside of this space, and so would love for you to be a part of it. Yeah, it's awesome. All right, so here we go. Things Jesus never said. Obviously, that's not Jesus, and the reason we put him up there is because we want to look at, like, there's a lot of sayings in culture that get attributed to famous people, and especially religious leaders, and especially Jesus. There's a lot of people walk around and go, well, I know that Jesus said, or I know that the Bible teaches, and so you have all these things in our culture that actually are pretty harmless. You have sayings like, don't cry over spilled milk, right? Did Jesus say that? Well, no, probably not. There's no record of that. But we like to give people like Jesus credit for a lot of, these kinds of sayings. And mostly a lot of these sayings in our culture are harmless, but there's actually some that aren't harmless. There's some that actually can be fairly dangerous. And many of us walk around in culture believing that that's true or believing that Jesus endorsed that. And so what we want to do in this series is just take a look at some of those statements and go, did Jesus really teach that? And we want to look at it from two angles. We want to go, did he say it? But we also want to say, what didn't he say? And what could he have said? Or what might I have said if I was in that moment? Because it tends to give potency then to what he actually said. And to kick us off thinking about our topic for the day, I want to ask you how sort of frequently and how you experience guilt. How is it that you experience guilt? What are the things that cause you to feel guilty? And I was thinking about that this week. There's a new one in my life this fall. It happens every fall. It's called college football. And so college football Saturday comes, and it's not really my fault. I have two teams. I have the Huskers and the Buckeyes. I feel like I have to show allegiance to both. But that can create a little bit of a conflict when I have a wife and I have kids and I have a house and I have all kinds of things happening around me. I often feel a little guilty, like, oh, how much time should I spend or not spend? And the truth is that's kind of a lighter one, but so much of my life, the way that guilt works in my life is I'm always thinking, gosh, I probably didn't do that well enough. I probably didn't do that fast enough or soon enough for them. Those people are probably disappointed in what's happening. And that's just like this constant sort of demons in my head that I have to fight. And I wonder for you, how does guilt work for you? I did some research this week on guilt, and it's probably not surprising, but researchers categorize kinds of guilt. And so I just wrote a few down. There's like general guilt, which covers almost everything, but that's the feeling of like I probably am not nice enough, I don't help people enough, I feel guilty when I say no. There's spiritual guilt. So some of you felt that when Kent and Karen were up here. I'm like, you should come help us in the kids. You're like, I don't really want to, but I feel kind of guilty. There's I don't serve enough, I don't give enough. There's a whole category of spiritual guilt. There's moral guilt. It's this, I was jealous. I realized I was jealous of someone. I told a lie. I swear like a sailor, and I know that I shouldn't, and I feel kind of bad about that. This one was interesting, a specific category for food guilt. So researchers say that about 29% of what we eat makes us feel guilty. So think about that. About a third of what we put in our body we feel kind of guilty about. There's a very special kind of guilt that I know nothing about, but I know is very real, and that's called mom guilt. Amen, moms, right? That's a special one. And then there's specific guilt over like specific incidents that happen in your life. And when I was thinking and researching this week, I was listening to a pastor who was talking about guilt, and he told this story that made me laugh. He was talking about, he and his wife hosted a small group at their church, and they'd invited a bunch of people they didn't know. So there's one of these groups like, hey, show up, we'll build some community. None of us know each other, and so these people showed up, and they're there, and they do the group, and everyone's kind of hanging out afterwards, milling around, eating the cookies or whatever, and the minutes are kind of clicking by. It's getting late in the evening, and so his wife goes in, cleans up the kitchen. People, there's still like a group of four just sort of hanging out, talking. So she kind of comes in, cleans up the living room a little bit, and then she checks out. She's like, I'm going to go to my bedroom. I don't know what's going on here. They're not leaving. And so she leaves, and he's starting to get agitated. Like he's saying some things to him like, well, that was a great group tonight. Look forward to seeing you next week. He's dropping these hints into the room, and no one's getting the hints, and he gets really frustrated. And he walks back into the bedroom, and he just kind of, he vents like, what is wrong with these people? They can't get any social cues. This is so awkward. They need to just leave. And he like goes on this rant. And he comes back out to, kind of try to get them out. And he comes out, and they're all just like staring at him. And it turns out that they had the baby monitor on in their room and out in the main room. And everyone just doesn't say anything, puts their head down, and slowly shuffles out the door. Ouch. That's kind of a funny one, a hard one, but a funny one. And we've probably all had a moment or two like that in our life. And those are things that we have to deal with and messes we have to clean up. But it's one thing to feel guilty about like that specific incident. It's another thing to find ourselves feeling guilty before God. And in today's scripture, we find two men who are guilty before God, and we find three men hanging on a cross, all accused of different things, and they all handle this idea of guilt very differently. And that's what I want us to look at to get to our topic today. And I'm going to read it. That was beautiful. We worship to it in French. I want to read it in English once again, just to kind of dial us all into what is a pretty famous text. So if you haven't been in church circles, this is a text that usually gets read Good Friday, right around Easter. It's this famous scene where Jesus is being crucified on the cross. And so it says, two other men, both criminals, were also let out with him to be executed. When they came to the place called the Skull, they crucified him there along with the criminals, one on his right, the other on his left. Jesus said, Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing. And they divided up his clothes by casting lots. The people stood watching, and the rulers even sneered at him. They said, he saved others. Let him save himself if he is God's Messiah, the chosen one. The soldiers also came up and mocked him. They offered him wine vinegar and said, if you are the king of the Jews, save yourself. There was a written notice above him which read, this is the king of the Jews. One of the criminals who hung there hurled insults at him. Aren't you the Messiah? Save yourself and us. But the other criminal rebuked him. Don't you fear God, he said, since you are under the same sentence? We are punished justly, for we are getting what our deeds deserve. But this man has done nothing wrong. Then he said, Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. And Jesus answered him, truly, I tell you, today you will be with me in paradise. Okay, very, very intense moment. So let's just sort of set the setting of what we have here. Crucifixion in the Roman culture for Jews was considered the worst thing that could happen to a Jewish person. It was reserved for very special criminals. And so there's a couple elements going on when a Jewish person is being crucified. There's a huge emotional, culture, shame-focused, centered kind of thing that's happening that we don't often dial into. But the Old Testament taught that if you were a Jewish person and you were hung on a cross, that was a sign that God's curse was on you. That instead of waiting till the afterlife to be cursed by God, you were being cursed now. And so it is the greatest amount of shame and sort of guilt you could experience before fellow Jews and before God. And so these three men are experiencing that in different ways. And then, of course, there's the physical part. And this is the one, if you've been around church, you've heard a lot of. But typically the reason that they lash people, there's typically 39 lashings that come before the crucifixion, and that's because they're trying to speed up your internal organs shutting down. Because the reality is, even though they hang you on a cross, you can actually live for a few days before you suffocate or you just die of exhaustion. And the reason that is worth noting is because the Romans would have to pay guards to stand up with the person on the cross all through the night and all through the day. They'd have to guard this person until they die. It's actually the reason that often the next day they would break their legs, so they could no longer hold themselves up to speed up their death. And so all of that is happening. And so that helps us from history conclude that these two men next to Jesus, sometimes the translation gets translated thief on a cross, but the better translation is criminal. And even if there was thievery, we're left to assume that people died as a result of these men's crimes, that there was death that occurred along with the thieving. And so these are really, really bad dudes that are next to Jesus. And all three of them on these crosses are in this indescribable moment, and they handle it all in different ways. So we have the first criminal who begins to mock and insult Jesus. So he wants Jesus to save him, doesn't believe he can, and he's mocking him and throwing all these insults at him, even though he's deserving of punishment. And then we get Jesus as the second person on the second cross, responding to this first criminal in the midst of his accusations and his insult. And Jesus looks up to heaven and prays. And keeping in the same vein of our series, Things Jesus Never Said, it's worth thinking, notice what Jesus did not pray in this moment. Okay, think if it was you, what are all the things you would have prayed? Jesus could have said, God, just send your angels and wipe all these idiots out. He doesn't say that, right? God, reveal their arrogance to them. Show them they're wrong. God, this moron next to me, strike him down. Just take care of him now. I could imagine Jesus going, I know we made that agreement to not wipe the slate clean, the flood, the promise not to do the flood, but let's do that. Flood 2.0 right now. These people deserve it. Jesus doesn't pray any of that in this moment, which is interesting, in the middle of what we can't imagine, the amount of pain. But instead, what does he pray? You know the famous line. He says, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. They're insulting me. I pray that you forgive them. And this is incredible. Obviously, it's one of the 1,000 reasons that many people admire Jesus because of moments like this. But it's in this context that it's also a very surprising thing happens. And that's the second criminal then begins to rebuke the first criminal. The second criminal comes to the defense of Jesus and basically says to the first criminal, hey, shut your pie hole. We are getting what we deserve. But this guy, he doesn't deserve any of it, and he's getting the same thing. This is crazy town. This should not be happening. And this then brings us to our question of the day. The second criminal brings it up. The question is, did Jesus ever teach or say, does the New Testament ever teach or say that you get what you deserve? You get what you deserve. Now, this is important for us to discuss because this debate is happening up on the cross. Actually, it's fascinating to think about. This conversation of do human beings get what they deserve has been sort of in the soup of all cultures for all times. And it's playing itself out on three crosses as Jesus hangs there. They're having this debate. They're claiming who's getting what they deserve. And this is a super intense moment, but this is a conversation that's happening in our culture. So you might see that and go, oh, no. But you need to understand that in our culture, people are talking about this concept all the time. It's deeply embedded in modern day America. From a positive standpoint, as Americans, we like to say, we're self-made, we pull ourselves up by our bootstraps, we're those kinds of people. I mean, that's actually the legacy of Denver, is it not? That's our heritage. There were some people who took a huge risk, traveled west, gutted it out, eventually found gold, and we typically look at them and go, they earned it. They got what they deserved. They took all the risk and they got the payout. They got what they deserved in a really positive way. But the thing that I've noticed about our culture when it comes to this concept is that we really want this to be true for others in negative outcomes for them, but in positive outcomes for us. So if good things happen to us, it's because we deserve it. But if bad things happen to them, and typically when we say them, it's not our family or our close friends. We love them. We don't want bad things to happen to them. But kind of anyone else outside of that circle, if bad things happen to them, we just kind of assume they probably deserve it. Like, we might not say it that way. We wouldn't say it out loud. But we tend to have these phrases in our culture that demonstrate what's in our heart. So like we say, you know what goes around comes around. Your past's going to come back to haunt you. You made your bed, now lie in it. All of these sayings in our culture basically translate to, you get what you deserve. And this is taught in some major religions in the world. Like, the concept of karma is effectively this idea. It's really interesting. This is everywhere. My 12-year-old came and got in my car, and we have this new ritual. By the way, this is a freebie I'm just going to give to you old folks that are like me. In my day, we used to say, "What's on the down low?" That like to get like, "What's up?" Like, what are the secrets? What happened? Now they say, "What's the tea?" Spill the tea. I don't know. I don't get it, but that's what you say. So my daughter gets in the car every day now when I get her, and I go, "What's the tea, girl?" And then she gives me whatever happened, during the day. And she goes on to jump in this week to talk about this boy who, he's really mean and he doesn't treat people well. Well, guess what happened to him? And she goes, "It's kind of like he got what he deserved." That's like karma, right, Dad? That's the conversation we had. They're getting what they deserve. Now, to test your own self, think about it this way. See if you fall prey to this. I want you to think of the political party that you like the least right now, okay? Not that any of you would ever think less of somebody or some party, but think of the party you like least. Now, I want you to envision the person you like least that represents that party. It's probably the face of Donald Trump or Nancy Pelosi or Adam Schiff. Okay, picture them. When you see something happen to them that's not good, or there's a scandal, or there's a bad media report, or something could be uncovered, what do you think to yourself in that moment when you see it? Exactly. Yay. They're about to get what they deserve. I knew it. And if I'm being honest, I really like this concept. Like, it feels good for there to be accountability for other people. Like, when someone goes flying by me on Wadsworth, I just pray a little prayer, "Lord, I hope the speed traps are up today." Never mind the fact that I probably sped on that same road yesterday. Right? Except when it applies to me, I want there to be accountability and people to get what they deserve. And this then is at the point of the story that God flips the entire story, the story of the cross, on its head and reminds us that his kingdom and his values are entirely upside down from ours. The second criminal looks at Jesus and says, "Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom." And in our series, thinking about what Jesus could have said, what he didn't say, what he never said, how does Jesus respond then to the criminal? It's worth thinking, what could he have said? Like he could have just looked at him, stone cold and said, "Nah, bro, you're going to hell." He could have done that. Like, there's nothing this guy can do. He's like a bad dude. Maybe a little lighter version of that was, "Hey, man, I think I recognize when I was preaching that sermon over on the mount, I saw you scrolling through your cell phone. You weren't paying attention. You wouldn't be in this moment if you had paid attention then." Because said, what I really think he could have said is, "Hey, man, I'm sorry. Your sins are too much and it's too late in the game. There's like nothing for you to do now. Like, sorry, that ship sailed." Those are all things that we would think, or at least that I would think, in that moment when you're looking at a really, really bad dude. But instead, what does Jesus actually say? Jesus says, "Today, you will be with me in paradise." Wow. That's probably the opposite of what would have been in my heart and mouth. And the context of Jesus saying this is what makes it so radical. Because he's saying it to a criminal who had zero time to do a single good work. This guy had no time to run out and get baptized. He had no time to join a church. He couldn't tithe. He couldn't go to the temple and drop in some money. He couldn't show up with the people of God and worship and cry and all sincerity before God. He couldn't do any of that. And yet Jesus looks at him, this guilty, sinful, yet repentant man, and says, today you'll be with me in paradise. He grants him the ultimate gift that heaven can offer, and there's nothing this man could do to deserve or to earn it. And if I'm being honest, and I think about this moment, and I watch that, if I think about his disciples watching that, who have left everything, left their businesses, done everything they can to follow him for 3 years, if I'm being honest, that doesn't feel like a very fair moment. Like, again, this is such a bad guy. And it seems like this guy's getting to cheat the religious system. He's getting to cheat the game. And everything in me wants to go, God, that's not fair. Like, I followed you for a long time. I gave. I served. I tried not to cuss. I read all the books that they said I should read. I even showed up for all those potlucks for small group. Like, I did all the stuff. It just doesn't seem fair. But once I sort of come to my senses and get over that rant, I begin to look at myself in the mirror. And if I just get honest and ask myself, well, Corey, what is your history? What is your past? Like, maybe it's not the same as this criminal's, but let's get honest. What's your past? And in light of your past, Corey, how would you want Jesus to address you? How would that go? Corey, in light of your history of drinking and driving as a teenager, but never getting hurt and never hurting anyone, how would you want Jesus to address you? Engaging in all kinds of unprotected sex with women you barely knew. And he had no pregnancies. Anger outbursts towards those I've cared about my entire life, and yet maintaining most of my close friendships. Certainly not doing 1,000 things over the 16 years of my marriage and still having my wife's unconditional love. Having to work every day and having blown it 10,000 times, losing my patience with my little ones. And yet, I'm still the hero in their eyes right now. At 10 and 12, I'm still their hero. Looking back over employment history and going, I've been very stubborn and actually pretty arrogant in a lot of moments with bosses, and yet I've never been fired once, and in fact, I've almost always been promoted. And in the end, just looking at my story and going, I was running away from God at every turn. I wasn't searching for God. I was living in a fraternity house doing what fraternity boys do. The backwards hat, the hoop earring, the whole deal. Not searching for God, and yet God came and he chased me down like the song that we just sang and gave me everything that I did not deserve. And I know for many of you that's your story too. As you sit in this room, and some of you are exploring faith and you're going, that is my story, but I haven't connected with this one yet you're talking about. But this is the good news of the gospel of Jesus Christ, that we believe, it's what we celebrate, that we don't get what we deserve. And this then, it's said so many ways in the New Testament. One of my favorite is in Ephesians chapter 2. When Paul is summarizing what it is that God has done for us, saying, you don't get what you deserve. He says, all of us also lived among them at one time, gratifying the cravings of our flesh and following its desires and thoughts, saying, you're just like everybody else. You're just like your culture. Like the rest, we were by nature deserving of wrath. You were deserving of wrath, but because of his great love for us, God, who is rich in mercy, made us alive with Christ, even when we were dead in transgressions. It is by grace you have been saved. For it is by grace you've been saved through faith, and this not from yourself. It is the gift of God, not by works, so that no one can boast. What Paul is saying is this: Jesus did not come to make bad people good. He came to make dead people alive. And what makes this really, really important in this conversation about do you get what you deserve is that if Jesus came to make bad people a little bit better, if he came to make bad people a little bit, more good, we might possibly claim that we participated in the activity of becoming good. But what we know for sure is that a dead man, a dead woman cannot participate in becoming good and becoming alive. That if that happens, it's because Jesus did it all. Jesus paid it all. There's nothing that I did to earn it. There's nothing that I did to deserve it. I did not get what I deserved. Jesus did it all. And if we truly believe that in our heart of hearts and in our mind, that we didn't earn any of it, we didn't get what was coming to us, then if we spin it forward into our day now, think about how it is that we then are propelled to live. Like, think about it this way. If then when Jesus forgave this man, this second criminal on the cross, and says, today you're going to be with me in paradise, imagine that the Roman soldiers standing there, they saw that. Somehow they came to their senses and went, this is crazy. And if Jesus is going to forgive this man, we're going to let this man off the cross. And they take this man down and they take him to the hospital and he gets healed up over a few weeks, a few months. How do you think that second criminal would have lived the rest of his life? Is it possible that he would have just walked around filled with joy, filled with amazement, going, this is a gift. Every day I wake up and put my feet on the floor. This is an absolute gift because I should be dead and yet I'm alive. It's as if Jesus took my place and I'm not getting what I deserved. And this then, friends, if you're a follower of Jesus, this is your story and this is my story. The story of the criminal is our story, that we were undeserving, that we were unworthy, that we had not earned it, that we were guilty, and yet the innocent one, the Lamb of God, the Son of God, was slain for your sins and for mine. And that's what we believe. And if we live with any passion at all now, it's only because we realize we didn't get what we deserved. And so there's so many implications for our life. Like, if you've freely been given something, and Jesus says, then give that away. If you've not been kept in Jesus' debt, then why would you keep others in your debt? When someone offends you, when someone's hurt you, when you look at someone and, they're not doing the thing you want them to do and you start to judge them, why would you do that when Jesus has done all this? And wouldn't we live with a ton of gratitude and a ton of freedom and walk around going, this is incredible, this life I get to live. I know my future. When we live in the most anxious sort of culture in all of history, when people are worried about today and worried about tomorrow, we know the end of the story. It's been guaranteed. And wouldn't we then become people who would just tell our story? Because we're so grateful for what we didn't get, even though we deserved it, and we would want others to know about that too. This is how I think the second criminal would have lived, and it's the call for us. And this week I was really touched. I want to close with this because I just thought, what's the picture of a person who's been touched by this undeserved, unconditional grace? They didn't get what they deserved, and they want to give that to other people. And there's a kind of a famous trial that's occurring right now that just ended that caught a bunch of sort of national attention. It's in Dallas, a woman named Amber Geyer. She was a police officer, came home off duty, came home. Apparently the way the apartment complex worked is there's a parking garage on each level, and she got confused and went to the wrong level. And she went to the 4th floor and not the 3rd floor where her apartment was. Comes into the 4th floor, goes to where her apartment she thought should be, walked into what was not her apartment. There was a black man who was there, and she shot him twice and killed him. And she's put on trial, and she was convicted. She was given 10 years, a sentence, for what she did. And as it goes with every trial, after the judge sentenced her, they allow the family and others to come and to speak. And usually the way that goes is the family member talks about how great their family member was, and then they typically address the murderer. And typically that goes like, I hope you think about what you did, and you took my family member. We can understand all that. We've seen plenty of those courtroom scenes. Well, the brother of the man who was killed got on the stand, and he did something very, very different. And I want you to see that as a picture of what it looks like when this gets a hold of you, when you don't get what you deserve. And so let's play it.
I can speak for myself. I forgive you. And I know if you go to God and ask Him, He will forgive you. And I don't think anyone could say it. Again, I'm speaking for myself, not even bad for my family. But I love you just like anyone else. And I'm not gonna say I hope you rot and die just like my brother did, but I personally want the best for you. And I wasn't gonna ever say this in front of my family or anyone, but I don't even want you to go to jail. I want the best for you. Because I know that's exactly what both of them would want you to do. And the best would be give your life to Christ. I'm not going to say anything else. I think giving your life to Christ would be the best thing that both of them would want you to do. Again, I love you as a person. And I don't wish anything bad on you. I don't know if this is possible, but can I give her a hug, please? Please?
Yes.
What an incredible picture. I don't want you to get what you deserve. I love you. I don't even want you to go to jail. I want what's best for you. This is what we believe. It's what our entire faith is staked on. And today, friends, again, receive it anew and afresh, that you and I, we don't get what we deserve. And may we go now and live lives that look that way, that live in the freedom and that carry the grace and the blessing of what God has done in our life, and may He use it to bring us into other people's lives. Amen.
Thank you for listening to the Mile High Vineyard podcast. We would like to encourage you to respond to what you just heard by filling out a Connect card and sharing a prayer request with us. As a staff, we pray over those each week and would love a chance to connect and pray for you. To do that, please go to milehighvineyard.org/connect. You can also respond by being generous, as God has been generous to you. You can do that by giving online at milehighvineyard.org/give. We hope to hear from you soon. Thanks again for listening.